I used to study occultism extremely heavily back in the day, and I probably up until I was, 27, when the band really changed direction, and everything kind of focuses around the band, and and it's been the better part of 20 years since I've even poured myself into it. So it's like all the messages and the morals and the stories that the core message that you get out of them remain, but all the details are just obliterated now.
Right.
It's like getting down to it and be able to discuss it in detail. I really start to lose my place anymore. Whereas if you had asked me 15 years ago, I'd be able to give you the down and out.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm finding, and again, we'll get into some of this later, but like with comparative religion, comparative mythology, what's important are the through lines. Like, all the little, Orion, was his arm cut off or was his leg cut off? Was it Orion or was it this thing, a Native American thing? And it's like, well, regardless, there's just the sort of the thing of either the hunter or the shepherd is like what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And all the little minute things aren't as important as
No.
It's just the message of like, well, what is a shepherd versus what is a hunter? That whole thing.
What is a keeper versus a watcher?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I knew we were going to get into it before we even started.
According to legend, some went to sleep in secret places, deep beneath their ancient cities, where no one could bother them. The rest walk among the stars, on errands we could never hope to understand, barely aware of our existence.
Hello and welcome, one and all, once again to the Snide Show. I'm your host, as always, Cornelius Edward Snyder, otherwise known as Corey the Curator. And today, we're diving deep into the mind of a musician who's been redefining the boundary between the audible and the otherworldly, the astral and the oral. Ladies, gentlemen, and eldritch entities, please welcome the prolific and extremely gifted frontman of the Ziggurat, Dwayne Boyd.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. It is great to have you here. But before we plummet into the esoteric abyss beneath the pyramid, let's loosen up with a little slice of life. What's new in the world of Dwayne Boyd? Encountered any cosmic oddities or terrestrial peculiarities lately?
My life has consisted for many months of nonstop recording and keeping my nose right in the middle of the band every moment of every day, much to everyone's dismay in my immediate surroundings. No time to hang out, no time to do this. Just always keeping my nose to the grindstone for sure.
Yeah, a true artist, man. A true artist. I've been mending fences and building bridges myself. Literally, I don't know if you spotted my half-built fence on your way in.
Did.
I can't even finish it until I get my moat installed, and then the bridge. A bridge without a moat, it'd be just silly. It'd be redundant, man.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So yeah, let's crank it up and move on to the Hot Sqoops. With more than 25 years spent erecting the Ziggurat, a high-concept mythological occult band, what's it like looking back on such a monument? 25 years. That's crazy.
25 years is a long time, and being in the position I'm in now, and really looking at how things have unfolded over the years, it's nothing ever turns out the way you expect it to. You think things are gonna stay on path and keep chugging forward, but with the way life happens and the band kind of goes on pause for a little while and then comes back and comes on pause. Each time it comes back, not just twice as strong, but by magnitudes every time. It comes back as a larger than life entity, because of the fans. And I think, the scarcity of the band creates a demand as well. People don't know how long it's going to be around, and so it really creates the moment for, the fans and the community at large to really dive deep into, when we're here and when we're available.
Yeah. Oh, the scarcity complex. And when you have that, yeah, it is kind of just like the supply versus demand thing, right? It
is.
But you've had so many different reincarnations, but there's still just the volume and quality is staggering. The art is a Lovecraftian, Geigeresque tapestry of musical mythology, both based on pre-existing mythology, and you've got some original bits in there. And particularly shout out to the chocolate Shoggoth shake, decadently postmodern, man.
Absolutely.
It's cool. I just, again, like we were saying outside, I love high concept stuff like that.
Yeah. Where do I begin with that? Chocolate Shoggoth specifically is one of our more infamous songs. Starting with when we perform it live, we start with the 1950s doo-wop intro that eventually blends into the blistering blender riffs that is the song.
Yeah.
Specifically written as a blender because it's about a guy at a chocolate shop feeding people pieces of Shoggoth as the chocolate syrup and creating a new brood of monsters. So
Right.
I wrote it specifically with that blendery, type of vibe going on in it.
Right. And spoilers. We'll be talking more about blenders later. Honestly, again, it's just so unique what you got. It's like the vocals are just that classically metallic vocalization, but it's all just very unique. It's very unique the way you guys put it together. I love like how much more rhythmic you are. Not to put anyone down to elevate you guys, but just like your stuff like has like catchy rhythms to it, like almost earworms.
I agree. We have a friend named Keith who said it perfectly one day. He was like, the Ziggurat has a musicality to it that you don't see in a lot of underground bands that are out there.
Yeah. There's so much noise out there and cool experimental stuff, but which you guys also get into. But yeah, it's the musicality. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, I my deep dive into your realm comes not just from being a fan and friend, and being with Ranger Rebecca, who has been a long time friend and collaborator of yours.
Absolutely, yeah.
But also just personal admiration, and the illuminating interview that you did with, I meant to bring it out here, Trevor Kennedy in Phantasmagoria. Oh, he's got a copy with Yes, this right here, folks, this right here, this is it's so good. And
this is a life achievement as well. I mean, like, I couldn't, this was truly a humbling moment to get to be involved in that.
Yeah, and it's such a cool volume, But a must read, folks, right after you get your hands on some Zigg albums. So, Dwayne, I noticed a recurring theme, and you talk about it a little bit, but not enough, in that interview of the Chaosium cycle, an arc that multiple authors have added to in your list of inspirations. Can you expand on that mythology?
Well, Lovecraft started with what he called Yog-Sothothery, which August Derleth later termed the Cthulhu mythos. And, when I first discovered Lovecraft and dove into it and lost my mind to it completely, it changed my life, I realized that there was very little source material. And so, going and looking for anything I could get that was relevant to it at all, the Chaosium cycle books were a godsend. You have all these authors that I'd never heard of, or I had heard of, like Robert Bloch, who got their start in Lovecraft stories, and later on, like Howard later on went to create Conan, and Rudyard Kipling got his start in Mythos, and then of course we know him from Jungle Book and Rikki Tikki Tavi. So many authors got their, it was their launch pad starting in Lovecraftian fiction, and seeing the Chaosium cycle books, which really pooled together all those authors and just presented them to you in clean-cut volumes, just really gave me the license to see that I could also create my own stories within my music and expand on it as well.
I love that, because that again, it's postmodern mythology. It really is.
Lovecraft did something really, really special with his craft, so to speak. Before him, it was, Poe and, Algernon Blackwood, and it was all still very gothic and very superstition-based and very ghosts and morose scenery. But then you also had, the emergence of, science fiction with, War of the Worlds and the concept of aliens, and then Lovecraft really took both of those and put them right together and presented them in a whole new light, where it's, it's not that they're gods, it's that they're aliens, and it's not that they're aliens, that they're, uncaring cosmic beings that just exist, and we're, they don't mean us harm, just like we don't mean ants harm when we walk across the grass, sorry about you. But what Lovecraft made with that was just amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, and it's fascinating stuff. And again, I love that kind of building, like in communities and stuff, and in fiction and stuff. Eat your heart out, J.K. Rowling, for not even letting anyone touch a fanfic, man. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
like,
and the Cthulhu mythos is public domain, which is one of the most amazing parts of the legacy, is that it was left open. I'm sure by Derleth and his, because he owned the rights to it after Lovecraft died. Just to allow it to ever expand. What we have now is not the end of it. In 20 years, there's going to be further expansions. In 100 years, there's going to be further expansions. And it has the possibility to literally grow indefinitely, far beyond what, poor Lovecraft ever would have thought possible.
Yeah. In thousands of years, either aliens or future civilizations will discover these works and think that we like it was real.
Yeah. They're going to think we were driven insane with how much we focused on it, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. There was the Age of Enlightenment. This is going to be the Age of Madness.
Yeah, well, we're clearly in the middle of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so speaking of deep reads, what's like a fringe theory that you secretly believe might be true?
A fringe theory? That's a tough one. I mean, I don't give a lot of credit to most things I hear.
Right.
But all right, the reset theory.
The reset.
That every 30,000 years, every 100,000 years, there's a major apocalypse that blows us back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And we have to start all over. And that, oh yeah, we think we have 10,000 years of history right now, beginning in Sumerian, Babylonian, even Ubaidian culture.
Yeah.
But more than likely, there was a culture before that that was obliterated, and a culture before that that was obliterated.
Yeah. The Hindus talk about that.
Looking at the pyramids, I learned it at a young age. The pyramids have weather damage, specifically rain damage. And the rain damage that's on it can't be accounted for with the age they're currently giving it. It has about 40,000 years of rain damage, and knowing when monsoon seasons come through that area, it would take quite longer than 40,000 years for that type of damage to occur.
Yep.
So, the speculation is that the pyramids are, 100,000 years old, if not older.
Yeah.
So little things like that sprinkled across the world, whether it's pyramids forming in different parts of the world that are completely unconnected, or images of the Anunnaki or other things that appear throughout different cultures, that are unconnected, remnants from this and then. I seem to give a little bit of credence to the idea that people and at least human type things have been around for quite a long time, and we have no recollection of it whatsoever because we keep getting obliterated.
Yeah. Either by our own doing, some sort of supernatural or science. Was it Aldous Huxley that said magic is just science we don't understand? So there may be some. Yeah, we'll get into all that more. Yeah, that's
awesome.
Another good call forward. So you also mentioned shows like The Outer Limits, which, unpopular opinion of mine, I've always felt outshines The Twilight Zone. At least I feel more with it. Any other film or show influences?
Oh my God! I mean, well, as you said, The Outer Limits. That was a huge thing for me. Growing up with, at the time, it seemed more mysterious and tense. But, looking at it now, it looks dated, and you just kind of take the story for what it is and enjoy it that way. But, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, there was an old show called One Step Beyond that was similar to that, but they were based on true stories. True. But Night Gallery, of course. Anything Rod Serling had a hand in, I'm all about it. I mean, I love Three Stooges. I do. And, those kind of things lend well to learning, to liking later, like things like Evil Dead, which also allow me to write songs like Chocolate She Got Shake, where I can put my tongue in cheek in a scary way, but also keep it campy, but serious at the same time.
The comical influences rather than the cosmical.
Yeah, and it all really follows itself. Growing up with Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, seeing it in black and white, even though color TV was obviously a thing.
Right.
I'm not that old, but watching Saturday morning cartoons, and then it was followed by Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy, the old black and white shows. So the visual representation of being okay with watching black and white and Twilight Zone allowed me to follow through with those things and well. And you even see some people from those shows in old Twilight Zone episodes. You got, even William Shatner, going on into Star Trek later on. Everything follows hand in hand with, my love for Twilight Zone, Star Trek, Star Wars, all these things. It's all just a long chain of events that's, fairly easily connected.
There's Gremlin on the wing.
Yeah, this man. Although the I think it was the late '80s Twilight Zone movie. That movie did a much better job with Terror at 10,000 Feet.
Yeah.
And John Lithgow was perfect in that role.
I agree.
And of course, the Gremlin looked 1,000 times better. Didn't look like old Greg anymore.
Old Greg. Love games. I have to agree. I mean, that was up there with like Tales from the Crypt as far as like nightmare fuel.
Oh yeah,
for a young core.
Tales from the Dark Side. There's an old show called Monsters. Just called Monsters. If you haven't seen that, check that out. Same era.
I need to check that out. Monsters. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, if you like Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side, check out the show Monsters. I can't remember how many seasons it had, but it was really well done. And I think there was a one that was a Stephen King story that was stuck in there called The Finger. And if you haven't read that story by Stephen King, The Finger, it's short, but it's fantastic. It's ridiculous, but it really hit home with me. It was great. Everywhere this guy goes, there's a finger coming out of the plumbing, whether it's the toilet, whether it's the sink.
That rings a bell.
And every time it's coming out, it has another knuckle and another knuckle, so it gets longer and longer and longer.
Until it's like longer than an actual
Oh yeah, it's
finger.
like a 14-foot finger with got 800 knuckles across it, and it keeps getting closer to dude, and it's
That's
fantastic.
freaky.
But the episode of it was pretty good too.
That's freaky, man. That's freaky. So, again, if you want to learn more of the inspirations and influences, particularly the musical sound, which is what I usually get into on here, but again, check out that interview because it's got like, you talk about like Judas Priest and like a lot of other influences that are on point. Like you can hear the DNA. You can hear the DNA.
Oh, absolutely.
But this sound wouldn't be possible without your talented team. You got Sterling Boyd, Steve Hammond, and Matt Waldenville rocking the stage, and then folks like Dave Carson conjuring the visual aspects. It's wonderful chemistry.
Oh, it's been absolutely fantastic. As you mentioned, my personal inspirations are much more classic. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Scorpions, Black Sabbath, Motley Crue, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I think the hooks come in with the band.
The musicality, yeah.
And that one thing that a lot of people said is that no matter who you are, if you come to a Zigg show, you're gonna like the music because that core is deep down inside of it, and you can hear that in it.
Yeah,
which gives it that musicality that Keith mentioned. But if I had been left to my own devices, the Ziggurat would have been a completely different beast altogether. It would have probably had clean vocals. It would have been much more retro sounding. It wouldn't have been as hard.
Okay.
But because of my own limitations and working within my means, I couldn't sing, so I growled. And the growling didn't really make sense going with such clean, retro music. So I had to approach it in a little bit of a heavier way. And my like for early death metal and black metal, I was able to slightly adapt it to where my retro music has a more aggressive tone to it.
That makes sense.
And that way I'm attacking the listener through a death metal lens no matter what I'm doing. So, that way my vocals make sense. And early on, Brad Shaneman, who was our bassist during the first incarnation of Zigg, he had a heavy hand in writing a lot of the music back then. It was pretty much 50-50 between me and him.
Okay.
And he was very much into punk. We had our shared love for Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Annihilator and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But a lot of his writing came through as well, and you can hear the relation between punk and the early retro metal, where it's that primitive, hooky type things that really draw the listener in. So that was great. But when that fell apart, and I got the second incarnation with Matt Waldenville, Chris Hoff, and my brother, they listen to much heavier music. Sterling listens to really blistering black metal. Matt listened to a lot more of the, I hate to say it, but more modern metal than I'm used to. Even though he's an old soul musically, he had that different touch of growing up in a different age.
Okay.
And Chris Hoff he loved, Suffocation and Cannibal Corpse and 6 Feet Under. So
Right,
when the collaborative writing wasn't just me and Brad, and it came over to me and those guys, everything just tanked to the heaviest side possible. We came up with, a whole new era of music that was not just catchy, but it was now brutal and catchy, to where actual pits would break out in the, at our shows. Whereas, people back in the day would watch us and enjoy seeing us play, but suddenly, the air was different, and at that time, not to make this a long-winded explanation, but right before Brad left the band, and right before we recorded Hymns of the Cthulhu Mythos, he was listening to a band called Ghoul and a band called Frightmare. And he was showing them to me and like what their concepts were about, sticking with like horror themes and stuff like that. And even though I was doing the mythology thing at the time being, we had touched on a little bit of Lovecraft because it falls into the occultism scope. But I was like, I really like what these guys are doing lyrically. And he said, I'm really glad to hear you say that because I would like to move forward doing things like this.
Awesome.
And so after a powwow, we decided to do an album completely about Lovecraft, which ended up being our first album, Hymns of the Cthulhu Mythos.
Yep.
And when he left, I recorded Confrontation and I recorded Plague of the Pallid Mask, which gave a base of music for when the new members came in. And they took that music and they made it heavier through their influence.
Yep.
And we started writing together and things got heavier and heavier. But we still managed to balance that old school feel into a lot of the music to keep it relatable. Because something I've always tried to do as a musician is that I want to be able to create my art the way I want. But I have to always consider what is the fan willing to listen to.
Yeah.
Because, fans have, music listeners have an expectation to keep them engaged in the music. And you can be artistic all day long, but you can also lose their attention. And so keeping them, involved in the music, either, if it's live, with your interaction with them, you can't do that for 15 minutes and keep that energy high.
Right.
So, writing the music with a heavier vein, we still managed to keep our songs around 5 to 6 minutes for the most part, which is a little long for most songs.
But metal, I think there's more flexibility there with metal.
Yeah, there's definitely flexibility. But yeah, having, the new guys involved really just made the band what it could be. And having Dave Carson shine on to us when I released Plague of the Pallid Mask, and willing at all to do any artwork for us was just humbling. And him doing the art really gave the band and the music a concrete identity, and it gave us a validity that I've been looking for forever. Because it's really hard to get out there and make a name for yourself as a band. You can play endless shows, you can do word of mouth and stay on the internet promoting yourself, but until you have a real solid identity, it's really hard to sell yourself.
Yes.
And, and having the new guys and having Dave come on board gave us the second incarnation of the Zigg, which really propelled us forward with getting better shows, better recognition, eventually opening for national touring acts in DC like Rotting Christ and Melakesh and Abigail Williams. That was definitely a highlight of the career.
Yeah.
But even that, life happens. Kids get older, jobs happen, people move away for various things happen, and the band went away again. And now, unfortunately, as hard as it is to come to terms with it, the resurgence of the band again was sparked by the passing of Chris Hoff.
Yeah.
I think it's almost 2 years ago now.
Man, if anyone out there is drinking anything, pour some out. That's man.
Hoff forever. But in the second incarnation, Hoff wasn't able to make it to a few shows, so he tapped Steve Hammond to be his replacement for those times he couldn't be it. And then fast forward to now when, you know, we went to do the memorial show for him. You know, we obviously asked Steve to come on and help us with that. And, you know, he played with us, and then we started getting more show offers because people saw that we had played.
Yeah.
And Steve was willing to take on the mantle of Cultist Eternal and start bleeding black for the Zigg. But his writing style, you know, is even more different, which is really cool as well. He even challenges me writing-wise. You know, me and my brother, we were able to bounce off of each other easily. We've grown up together, you know, we learned music together. Yeah. Matt being an old soul and being in the band previously, he knows how I write, I know how he writes, so it's a very seamless, you know, process. But with Steve, we've been writing a new song and getting Steve involved on it. And I've had to take a moment or two to wrap my brain around his approach to writing music. So when those songs come out, it's going to turn the band around in a different direction, you know, again.
Interesting.
Always evolving, always become a further cosmic core.
And conditioning the Ziggurat.
Yeah, it always gets better and better and better.
So as a high priest of this order, what would this school of thought or religion be called? Like followers of the Ziggurat?
It's the followers of the Zigg Nation.
The Zigg Nation.
It's always been the Zigg Nation.
Hell yeah, yeah. I was just curious about that. So you did you've mentioned I believe at least once your upcoming release. Spill the tea on the upcoming Lovecraftian sonnet Oculus.
Occultus.
Occultus. I'm sorry. That was my bad. That was a little typo. Occultus. Debuting. Let me just take that again. So before we wrap this up, spill the tea on the upcoming Lovecraftian sonnet Occultus, debuting in December, right?
Well, that was the original plan. But like all things, they can't happen until the stars are right. The original plan was to do some choice songs off of our previous albums with a updated recording, so I could finally be pleased with how they are presented. I've always had an issue with that. But Lovecraftian Sonnet Occultus is in the works. It will be coming at some point, not in the distant future, in the relatively close future.
Soon enough.
Yeah, soon enough. Right now we're working on a few tracks from our second album, Confrontation with the Disciples of the Shadow Walker.
Wow.
We already finished the re-recordings from Hymns of the Cthulhu Mythos, which were released earlier, around the mid-year of this year. And we want to have this Confrontation released by the end of the year, before 2024. Life happens, slows you down a little bit.
Yeah.
But really excited about Lovecraftian Sonnet Occultus because, believe it or not, that material is already 10 years old.
Whoa.
And, you know, like I said, when the band pauses or something happens that is you know, we have to stop playing for whatever reason, you know, that music was written and ready to be recorded right before that happened. And so it's been sat on for 7 years, and it was already being written for 3 years. So we're real excited to get that out of the way so we can truly work on new material, because, you know, Chris Hoff and Matt and Sterling have all written music for Lovecraftian Sonnet Occultus. It was really the showcase moment of that era's writing material.
I see.
And that era is already gone.
Right.
Yeah, which is, you know, and that's been a litany of the band for forever.
Yeah.
You know, in the beginning, we played out as much as possible and never got around to recording. And then once life happened and everyone split up, me and Brad recorded Hymns of the Cthulhu Mythos, which is actually our second set of material. And then when Brad left, I went back and recorded the first set of material, which was Confrontation, which was the previous years.
I see.
And then, you know, and everything falls in a really wonky manner with the way the Ziggurat is, but you know, you can't record and decipher what's on the walls of the Ziggurat until you finally figure it out and are able to do it.
steps of the pyramid.
Yeah.
So on that note, where all can people find more of you and the Ziggurat?
But music-wise?
Music-wise, social media, all that stuff.
And we're on the standard staples of social media, Instagram, Facebook, the blasphemous thing that is TikTok. All the major social medias, Bandcamp, which is probably the best site, because anytime someone purchases something, we get almost all the income from it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
that's
Spotify, any major streaming service, we're on there. You can buy it on Apple Music. If there's a streaming place or a place you can buy it, we're available there.
Excellent. As a parting question for this segment, if you could have dinner with any fictional character from these works, who would it be?
Randolph Carter.
Randolph Carter. Explain.
Yeah. Well, he's been involved in multiple stories and has been subject to multiple horrors. It's like he's a character that Lovecraft decided to stick in here and there as his main character, whether it's the Statement of Randolph Carter, or whether it was the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, or Beyond the Gates, Beyond the Silver Key. He's seen a lot, and he's done a lot. Most people don't survive in Lovecraft stories.
No, right.
Almost everyone dies. And if you survive, then you're normally Randolph Carter. And so,
That's
I think
funny.
that'd probably be the best idea,
He could tell you everything.
Yeah, he went to the Dreamlands and went across the entire expanse of it, and saw the faces of the gods on the back of the mountains, and confronted everything you could ever want to imagine to talk to him about. He has firsthand experience of it all.
Yeah. That's a great answer. That's a fantastic answer. I can't wait to find some illustrations and stuff of Randolph to put.
It's also why I named my son Carter.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's
my wife wouldn't
cool.
let me name him Randolph Carter. But I managed to get Carter in there as his middle name, and we call him Carter. So
that's cool. That's really cool. Well, thanks for delivering the hot scoops on this segment. We're going to be right back after a break to get into some info scat. Welcome back to the Snide Show. This is Info Scat, where we dig through this shit to find the golden kernels of truth. And folks, today's a special one in honor of having Dwayne Boyd, the high priest of the Zigg Nation, on. We're plunging our hands into the metaphysical muck and putting it all in a blender. Add a couple layers to your tinfoil hats for this one, folks. I got ancient astronauts, I got stoned apes, I got Silurian hypothesis. I don't often say that out loud. Comparative religion, mythology, more. This is the cosmic quilt of theories. I submit to you that all of these theories may all have little bits to them that point to a grander unifying web of information. But we only have so much room on the table. So here's what I have today. You ready?
I'm ready.
Ancient astronauts, the cosmic puppet masters of mythology and evolution. Let's dive right in, or dive out, depending on your perspective. We're talking about a theory that not only traverses the boundaries of culture, but also defies the very fabric of history as we know it. From the Anunnaki described in Sumerian myths, to the Titans of Greek legends, to the Nephilim in biblical texts, and even ancient deities from the Buddhist scriptures that date back 8,000 years BC. Could all these celestial entities be different names for the same extra-dimensional forces? Beings, perhaps? Let's pause for a moment and consider the works of Zecharia Sitchin. His translations of ancient Sumerian texts make a compelling argument that the Anunnaki were not gods, but beings from different planets. In these texts, etched in cuneiform tablets, they detail how the Anunnaki were responsible for creating humanity and influencing its growth and development. Sitchin's work dovetails with similar interpretations of texts in the like the Dead Sea Scrolls, various Vedic and Buddhist scriptures, all hinting at celestial intervention. Right.
I mean, yeah. Where do we begin on that can of worms?
I mean, you also have this the star people of Native American texts, and all of these stories are thousands of years old, penned by cultures that had no way of communicating with each other. Yet here we are reading similar stories. You got modern interpretations from renowned authors such as Eric von Daniken, who wrote *Chariots of the Gods*. They've further popularized these theories, citing the ancient artwork, technological marvels, and records that seem impossible without some sort of advanced help. The ancient astronaut theory presents a narrative that strings together mythology, history, into a unified view of the human development. We see common themes of celestial beings descending from the sky, teaching humanity and sometimes leaving chaos in their wake. Could it be possible that these figures are indeed the same entities, just painted in colors from different cultures and times? For more, watch the first 2 seasons of Ancient Aliens. Watch it alone and high. And then after that, it's kind of garbage unless you watch it to fuck around with your friends while you're high. But no one did that better than Action Bronson and Friends. So look that up. Action Bronson and Friends. Watch Ancient Aliens for more.
We're just passing through on this big spaceship of ours. Intergalactic travel, different types of realms and stages. Next level mindfuck shit. I feel good. We're back.
So what's your view on Ancient Astronaut in particular?
I mean, there's quite some curious things, going on. I mean, you can't readily dismiss all of it.
Right.
There's a lot of coincidence going on there, and there's a lot of, a lot of the facts they present to you fall into place. I can't say whether or not they're falling into place because they want them to fall into place, though.
Right.
I like to think of myself as a believing skeptic. I've read, like I said, Von Daniken and Zechariah Sitchin on these subjects, long time ago. But, his explanation of the Anunnaki and the planet Nibiru, it does leave a lot of questions. Early Sumerian tablets, when they show, the planetary systems, there's always an extra planet in there.
Yes, Planet X.
And we didn't discover all of the planets until early 1900s.
Yeah,
when we finally verified that Pluto was there.
Yeah.
But yet, you have these people from. Hey,
okay.
You did it.
I saw her rolling over more and more and more.
It's too deep of a subject for you. You had to leave. But yeah, if you look at a lot of the Sumerian tablets, she'll start speaking in ancient tongues here in a second.
Yeah, right. It got her all worked up.
But there's a lot of information that's really hard to explain how they had it. And if you look at the depictions of their stories of how they received their knowledge, their information, it opens up a lot of doors of questions. Were they just being extra with their delivering of the story? Were they overpainting it to make it more wonderful in their stories of the gods, or were they gods? Right. It's a tough one to call sometimes.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with it too. The way I put it is, I think a lot of things. I don't believe in a lot, but I think a lot of things.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But I know a lot of people who subscribe to ancient alien theories.
Yeah.
And alien intervention, and I can't explain all of it away. But my personal view is that, as I said, with humanity being reset over and over again through cataclysm, I don't think we need aliens to explain it. Not. I just think we need excessive amounts of time to accomplish these things. You don't need aliens to create pyramids in 4,000 years when you could probably build them in 200,000 years over the course of multiple dynasties and multiple generations.
Yeah, exactly. And like me, well. We'll get to more of this because, what if they were all just stoned? What if they were all just tripping balls and that's what all the God stuff was, We got stoned ape theory, the evolutionary mushroom cloud. This tantalizing theory has been popularized by the man, the myth, the legend, Terence McKenna. According to McKenna, psychedelic mushrooms were the evolutionary catalyst that sparked human consciousness rather than cooked meat, or maybe some blend of the two.
If you look at the ancient tablets, any depiction you see of the gods, and I'm sure this has been pointed out in Ancient Aliens, I believe I've seen it, is that they are always wearing a very specific wristband or armband. It's like a mixture of sun, moon, and water imagery. Say it's just like a bracelet with a circle on it. I didn't want to get that as a tattoo, so I got it as an armlet.
Oh, shit.
On there.
Yo.
That goes all the way around, my own variation of it, but I also got a moon version of it on this side. And I got that idea shortly after not even discovering Sitchin, but discovering Sumerian mythology and making that link on my own. Just looking, every time I looked at the imagery that was there, I noticed that every king and every god and every spiritual being always had that bracelet on. Wow. And so I wanted to make sure that I got that on me somewhere, and then managed to.
Fascinating. Yeah, I actually never picked that up. Actually, that's really cool. That's and I, man.
Yeah, go back and look through it all. You'll see it on every single one. Stoned ape theory. Bunch of high gorillas.
Yeah. Terence McKenna was a luminary in his own right, suggesting that the psilocybin in these magic mushrooms led to the expansion of our cerebral functions, influencing language, culture, technology. His theory is supported by anthropological findings that show a sudden, unexplained leap in human intelligence and human intellectual capabilities. There's like a million years of Homo sapien, but we didn't start, society until 100,000 years ago or something, So imagine if this gift of mushrooms was not a product of natural selection, but a cosmic nudge from entities wanting to see how far we could go. These mushrooms could be akin to receiving an evolutionary software update, a tool to accelerate our neural growth. Contemporary writers like Graham Hancock in his book Supernatural have also explored similar theories that involve plant-based substances having a mystical or supernatural origin. It could be also just things like tobacco, cannabis. He delves into shamanic traditions that consider plants as sentient beings with wisdom to offer, like the ayahuasca rituals. When people go down there, they talk about the plants and the mixture of the plants, creating an entity or a link to entities. Deeper into stoned ape theory, beyond Terence McKenna's presentation of the subject, there's just a trove of evidence that lends credibility to the idea that psychedelics played a crucial role in development of human consciousness. The neuroscience studies have shown that psilocybin, the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, has a profound impact on the brain's serotonin receptors, affecting mood, cognition, and perception. Everyone knows that, but it's not just about a good trip. They also say that it stimulates neurogenesis, so the birth of new neurons, neural growth. It's been backed by research from Johns Hopkins University, which they've also found that psychedelics produce a long-term positive change, in therapeutic contexts. But, there's also the history. Again, the Dead Sea Scrolls, often associated with the early Christian mythologies, the Hebrew stuff, honestly, pre-Christian. We find references to sacred plants, visionary herbs. While these texts aren't naming names, they weren't naming things like we do now. The context and descriptions, point again to some circumstantial evidence there. So in ancient clay pots around the same areas, they've found traces of fermented mushrooms. Like fermented, they would make like a like a mead from mushrooms and alcohol and what have you. So 6,000-year-old remnants of this shit. That was deliberate. That was a deliberate thing that ancient people did, and they must have been doing it for a long time. It's compelling evidence, honestly, that there was a psychoactive based culture, and again, if we're going to like. Mesopotamia, northern Africa, it was much more lush at a certain time during this development. And there was a desertification in that area over thousands of years. And they think that as that happened and psychoactive plants were harder to find, they began more just fermenting things, and we went from a more psychoactive based people to like an alcoholic based people around that time,
using what was available.
Exactly, and what would last. So again, there's perhaps this was a nudge of some sort. There was some sort of influence that told us that we could do that. Where did we learn that? Where did we learn these things?
That's the great question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how did we figure that out?
Yeah, like you said, like it could have been just trial and error over tens of thousands of years, but that knowledge being passed down like that. There's also the idea that we used to have a longer memory when things were more verbally transmitted rather than before the written language. And when there was the written language, our memory got shorter. Our verbal memory became a short-term memory rather than long-term memory. And now it's getting shorter and shorter with shit like TikTok and shit.
Dude. Yeah, jeez. No, you're absolutely right on that, though. As a new technology is developed, something else atrophies, and it's going to happen. You can't stop it. And if there's no longer a need to retain information on your own, then your body will naturally purge it.
Yeah.
And whether it's the written word, whether or not it's electronics or social media or anything, everything comes with a balancing act attached to it.
But I know we've been having these THC receptors, these nicotine receptors, all that shit for a long time. And that's wild that we evolved in such a way, and especially with like cannabis, because to activate that, you got to introduce heat.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff like psilocybin, they're like, oh, well, it's a defense mechanism because if something comes by and eats it, it'll trip and not eat it anymore, and there will be more of it. But with something like weed, it's like you have to introduce heat to it, and you have to, there's something co-evolutionary there.
Someone may have needed to stay warm one day and cut it and dried it and burned it and got really happy while standing next to it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a supernatural means for a simple explanation. That might be something as simple as that. There's a book called The Golden Bough, which is a good ball buster when it comes to a lot of supernatural ideas and theories. Whether it's the afterlife just being someone who had a dream originally and told someone about it.
Yeah.
I saw my mom in my dream. Yeah. She must still be alive. And then, 100,000 years later, you have church. And it's because I 100% buy into psychedelics pushing, whatever animal first ate it over the edge. Yeah. In the entire world, you have plants, you have animals, and then you have fungus. It's a completely separate thing, and the way it communicates with itself, it has a large, extensive network of mycelium, root systems that just go sometimes for hundreds of miles, depending on which one it is. A single organism that can cover the entire, area of a national forest. A single organism. That thing's not just a dumb fungus.
Yeah.
There's definitely something interesting and something going on there with the stoned ape theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, as someone who has taken acid and someone who has taken mushrooms, I mean, you're not the same after you've done it. You never look at the world the same again.
Yeah.
You can't overstate that enough.
Yeah.
There's pre and then there's post.
It's true.
Like having kids. You can imagine having kids, but until you had them, you can't actually imagine it. And
Right.
and knowing what psychedelics did to me in the time that I was doing them, it's 100%. I'm 100% certain that if a early primate of some sort had introduced to that, it did what it did to me, which means that it was never able to look at the world the same again.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a generational thing where they, it might be a defense mechanism to make people not eat it, but we see lemurs get poisonous centipedes and millipedes and play with them and bite them lightly on purpose so that they can get a psychedelic reaction from it. And they will stay near the millipedes, and once it wears off, they'll get it, play with it, bite it a little bit more, just enough to get high for a couple hours. And their children will see this, and they'll do that. So you're going to tell me that in 1.5 million years, lemurs aren't going to be where we're at now?
That would be amazing.
All you need is time and exposure.
Yeah.
And
they start developing a little economy of the centipedes, and then that influences their society to be, more agrarian.
Yeah, but it's going to do something.
Yeah.
And given the opportunity, all things, at least many things, can develop beyond where they are now to a level of sentience and intelligence that, you could have a conversation. We can pretty much have a conversation with an ape right now.
It's wicked.
If we keep feeding Coco, rest Coco's soul. If we kept feeding these gorillas that can communicate with us, psychoactives, on a small basis, thousands of years, millions of years from now, once they've evolved into that, you could force evolution that way, possibly.
Yeah.
But I give a lot of credence to the idea that the early psychoactives is what changed the pathway for a lot of the early hominids and primates.
Absolutely. And one thing on the mushroom mycelial connection, they almost act as like an internet. Like what we see of like trees and mushrooms are like essentially the hair and skin of the thing. The brain of the thing is down in the roots, and they'll trade like proteins with each other and nutrients and stuff, and mushrooms are a part of that whole thing.
In a very beneficial, symbiotic manner.
I love that. Yeah. They have their own society underground, like specifically. But yeah. On the skeptical note, of some sort of alien influence being a part of it, it being some sort of thing that was coded into our environment to help manipulate us or whatever, that neither here nor there. Yeah, the neurogenic qualities, the fact that we have neurons for that stuff, and the anecdotal evidence of creatures doing the same thing. Yeah.
You have dolphins playing with pufferfish to get high. You see countless examples of it in nature.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a question to anything in life, all you have to do is look to nature, and you're generally going to find the answer in plain sight.
That's true. That's very true. Maybe the other thing about like the plants, the psychoactive substances, but this also goes to just agriculture in general, beyond just the psychoactive stuff. Maybe that stuff is all left there from a previous incarnation of genetic modification, whether through artificial selection or like natural selection of just like, because they say down in South America, like where we find a lot of these psychoactive things, that there are a lot of fruits down there that had to have been artificially selected. Like there is a lot down there that they found a pyramid down there they thought was a hill for a long time, but it was actually a pyramid beneath all of this jungle stuff, and that all this jungle might be a runaway effect of the fact that like once the societies there from like thousands of years ago were obliterated, because there, even before the colonists, there was and I can't even get into it because I don't understand enough about it. But in South America, ancient South America and Central America, there were wars between the Incans and Aztecs, and there was all sorts of different confrontations, and there was some sort of event that left one of those civilizations essentially wiped out. If you look at like the El Dorado mythos, they talk of that sometimes, and they may have found El Dorado beneath all this jungle, which again may have been a runaway effect of like they weren't there to landscape anymore. They weren't there to like
nature took back over.
Nature took back over, yeah. Which if you watch like after Earth After People, like it doesn't take very long. So there may have been. There's this hypothesis, the Silurian hypothesis, the lost chapters of Earth's history, of humans' history. It's a theory that suggests an ancient civilization may have existed on Earth before Homo sapiens or at the beginning of Homo sapien. Imagine a world where another intelligent species flourished, a cousin of ours. Ancient texts always contain cryptic passages that hint at ancient civilizations with wisdom beyond their years. Things like Atlantis.
Lemurians.
That's right. So could these early inhabitants be entities who just packed up and left for another planet or dimension, or returned to where they were from, or simply evolved into us after some sort of extinction event or some prehistoric war? The term Silurian hypothesis comes from Doctor Who, where it was first coined, but serious scientists like Carl Sagan have discussed the feasibility of such civilizations existing in lectures and writings. Ancient texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls to the Hindu Vedas often describe flying chariots and advanced weaponry, descriptions that make you wonder if they were talking about some forgotten technology. Rather than alien shit, it was just some Homo sapien shit. The thread that connects all of these theories, is that there was a relay race of knowledge and wisdom passed from one civilization to the next, whether it's Silurians, astronauts who planted some psychedelic mushrooms, or it was some previous sort of part of their like psilocybin was left over from that civilization. Adding some bones to this, the idea of an intelligent civilization preceding us isn't just sci-fi. Scientists like Adam Frank, Gavin Schmidt have published papers exploring the feasibility and evidence of early industrial civilizations, considering geological markers, much like we leave behind a layer of plastic and pollutants. An ancient civilization would have also had to have left behind geological evidence. Researchers are investigating the idea of technofossils, materials that could have only been produced by advanced technologies. While no definitive evidence has been found yet, the search is ongoing. But we look more at cultural footprints. Again, stories like Atlantis, other lost civilizations, El Dorado, stories of advanced ancient societies aren't limited to Plato's writing. They exist in many folklore, and they often are described as wise, but ultimately doomed due to their hubris or external calamities. The Mahabharata, an ancient Indian epic, talks of an advanced warfare and flying chariots. The ancient Native American legends refer to the star people. Again, maybe not aliens, maybe just some other people, you know. The Dead Sea Scrolls come back into play here. Again, they hinted at beings of old, wisdoms forgotten. While it's all very cryptic, these texts provide another layer of evidence that we might not be the first intelligent inhabitants of Earth. So again, the through lines of ancient advanced people. And again, we'll get to one more step as to what ties some of this together. But this one is closer to what you were talking about earlier, Dwayne.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, the idea that civilization started with Sumerians in Mesopotamia right before Egypt, to me, is just nonsense. The fact that, the idea that there's been other cultures long before us, whether or not they were us or like us, or whether they were completely different from us, the Lemurians, the no-gendered beings that laid eggs, and, I don't know if that's the case. I have no evidence that that's the case, other than Madame Blavatsky saying that that's the case. But,
right? I mean, there's some wild stuff out there, folks. If you start digging into it.
That was a lot of material to cover right there.
I was just trying to get the highlights.
Yeah, but like your genetic things about the South America with plants and stuff that shouldn't belong there. I mean, to give a simple example, cauliflower is not naturally occurring. Brussels sprouts aren't naturally occurring. But now that we've made them, if we were to go extinct, Brussels sprouts are going to be here, and the next culture will be like, well, did the aliens make this? No, and that sounds ridiculous, because, no, it's just Brussels sprouts.
Like, where,
Yeah, and something similar may have happened down there, and especially when you get to South America. There's a lot of ideas of what happened to these cultures and where they went and why they disappeared. An author named Daniel Quinn covers a lot of that in his books, putting it very dryly, is that they saw that their civilization wasn't working, so they left.
Whoa.
They just left it as it was and let nature take it back.
Moved north.
Yeah, I mean, because the jungle gave them everything they needed for thousands of years, and once they started using agriculture and their slash and burn technique, it just started destroying the land. And so their progress was regression, rather. It wasn't working. So, the idea that they abandoned it makes perfect sense. And the things that they created, like Brussels sprouts, even though they didn't have Brussels sprouts, were left behind. So there's evidence of that. But those cultures could have been here before the Sumerians.
Mm-hmm.
They could have been here, before the before times, so to speak. And talking about like the technological archaeology, why aren't we finding advanced technology of things like that? What was it? Plastic has a half-life of what, like 4,000 years, or styrofoam has a half-life of 4,000 years.
Right.
So all you need is 8,000 years to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to find a lot of that. And, the little bits of gold for your microprocessors and things like that, by the time everything else is decayed into nothingness, you're going to find a tiny nugget of gold that you're going to mine in Alaska in a pan. You're not going to find these things. Although you have some people who, in some of these shows and reports, where they say they've found, perfect spherical balls inside, the strata of the earth that can't be explained. Well, who's to say we didn't have bullets 80,000 years ago? To me, that seems, like that's not a stretch.
Yeah. If we're like 1 million years old, then yeah.
Yeah, and like, okay, right now, I'm older than I'd like to be, but I remember I worked at a hospital, and I remember when medical records went from physical copies to digital copies. Mm-hmm. And now we see currency going from physical currency to digital currency. All you need is a couple, 200 more years before there is no physical documentation, no physical books, no physical this, no physical that. And then all you need is an EMP to blast us back to the Stone Age, because we got rid of all of our physical stuff. And that could be the event that we're talking about. And an EMP would immediately cause at least half the population of the Earth to die. The food system would collapse, the economic system would collapse,
medical system,
the dams would collapse, the cataclysm would be global, and it would be catastrophic, and it would take humans another 20,000 years to recuperate from that.
Right.
And by the time they recuperated from that, they'd be carving on stone because they need physical copies.
Yeah.
They would need stone buildings because all their other buildings were annihilated.
Yeah.
And so the Great Reset would happen again.
Metal rusts away. Like,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
stone erodes. Like, again, flashback to the Giza pyramids, which I didn't even mention. You know, the what may have been the building of the pyramids may have been just a like a renovation of sorts, and that would have been the same point that Khufu's head was put on the Sphinx, which again, like the head doesn't even match the body of that. That would have been a lion, and they carved a human head down into it. That's
Yeah, to change it from a chimera over to a pharaohic entity.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the big things that I've always had an issue with is that, you know, from what I understand, the Egyptian governments and archaeologists know that there's a cavernous space below the Sphinx, or within the Sphinx. I can't remember which one it is.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to open it up.
Yeah.
And I call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
Open that bad boy up.
All that
Come on,
stuff.
there's something worth noting going on there.
Yeah.
And if it's an empty void with nothing, well, then it's an empty void with nothing.
Let's see.
You know, that's fine, but come on.
There's a weird stranglehold there. There's a weird thing, because there is also the, you know, again, going back to the skeptical side of this stuff, there is the school of thought that by attributing, you know, these advancements to, you know, something more than human, you're taking away from like the accomplishments of humanity in different cultures and stuff. And I don't think so. Because again, to your point, like people still would have had to have been involved in some capacity. It always, you know, it doesn't really change history. It just extends it. But there's a weird, I don't know, there's a weird academic tightrope with the whole, you know, the controversy of admitting that humanity was advanced longer than it was, you know, because I guess the argument is that it rewrites a lot of stuff, and so a lot of people lose a lot of jobs, but I don't think so.
No, I completely disagree. That's going to further your job. Yeah. Suddenly your job has more depth. You know, suddenly you have more information to work with. You know, if you find out that aliens built the pyramids, are you out of a job? No. Holy shit, aliens built the pyramids, and we finally have evidence of that.
Yeah.
That's not rewriting history isn't a chore. It's an amazing opportunity to understand reality.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, people have been talking about aliens and spiritual beings from the stars. You know, there's got to be some nugget of truth buried in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think humanity's ego doesn't really want to let that be the case.
The ego is the thing.
But I also find that a lot of times I think the alien explanation, you know, aliens did it. To me, a lot of times sounds like God did it. It's the explain away.
Yeah, God of the gaps, alien of the gaps.
Yeah, you don't have to have an alien to do it. Humans are more than capable of amazing things.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is look around at the world now and see what we're capable of just now. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's absolutely staggering. Well, you know, we invented the internet, which of course destroyed, you know, people's intellect. But you know, the balancing again.
It's going to be interesting what it does to the next generation. If it wasn't aliens and it was some earlier Homo sapien, a proto sapien, if you will. Yeah, like you said, it doesn't really take away from anything. I mean, what we might know again of what was the construction of the pyramids, you know, which again, you know, the controversial part of that is that if we say that it wasn't, you know, the plight of the slavery that was going on then, that it takes something away from that, which I don't, you know, get into all that. It's more like, again, it was probably some sort of renovation, some sort of further. They obviously had slaves. That was obviously still happening. That doesn't take away from that, in my opinion. So, you know, but again, I think the bigger thing is, I think you're right, is that the ego, that if we have to rewrite things, then suddenly it takes away from like someone's accomplishments or something.
Yeah, expanding on someone else's theory or someone else's discovery does not make their discovery any less important. People have been expanding on Einstein's theories nonstop, and yes, he got a lot of it right, but then they sometimes take it a step further.
Yeah.
Learn a little bit extra about it.
Yeah.
Once you get down to quantum levels of things, then things start to make no sense at all. So, it's not taking away at all. You learn as you go. And I think, if humanity learned that the aliens had something to do with our early advancement, then I don't see how that's any negative, any type of negative thing versus, oh wow, suddenly we understand there was a culture before Sumerians from 20,000 years ago.
Yep.
Either one's just a gut punch to the ego of the people who don't want to rewrite history.
Right.
Or expand history. That's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Exactly. On the note of quantum, did you see that picture that came out of what quantum entanglement looks like?
I did not.
They blasted some particles together, and they were able to finally get a picture of what it looks like. It looks like yin and yang. It looks perfectly.
I did see that.
Perfectly like yin and yang.
Yeah, they were using like photon patterning, I believe, and it came out with something that was just like it.
It's insane. So again, that's like, well, that symbol's from these ancient, 8,000-year-old texts, and is all about like balance, and like, back then they were talking about, they were basically talking about atoms back then, if you break things down small enough, So it's again, there may be something to this advanced information that we just we're now relearning.
I also subscribe to the idea that most people don't care enough to know these things. And, they have their easy answer of, sorry people, Jesus, or, their God, or they don't care to know. I find that to be very shallow. I find that digging deeper is what's really important. And there's a lot of things, like you said, with the yin and yang symbol, that ancient people understood these symbols. How did they understand these symbols without knowing how to get these images? And you look at these studies of people who put, sound and frequencies through steel plates with sugar or salt on top of them. You get to a certain frequency, you start to get mandalas and God's eye shapes and all this sacred geometry. That you recognize right off the bat. Yeah. And each frequency has a different shape, and if you put all frequencies together, I read this study that showed that a conch shell represents a majority of frequencies layered over top of each other, the way it's built in structure.
Oh,
and
wow.
For a lot of things, and if you look at atoms, and if you look at string theory, everything's vibrations. Everything's music.
Yeah. Yes,
everything is a sound.
Yes.
And the universe, black holes have sound, everything has a sound, and those sounds can be made into visual patterns if you project them the right way. Yeah. And all those projections all look like very familiar religious symbols.
Right. Yeah. And two things on that. Like when you're on shrooms or acid and you close your eyes and you see like those fractals and stuff, you see kind of sacred geometry like mandalas and stuff and kaleidoscoping. And then back to the pyramids, the theory that perhaps they were not like before they were tombs when the pharaoh took
supposedly
over. Allegedly they may have been some sort of essentially giant Bluetooth speaker, because you've got these different rooms that have different shapes, and if you play certain notes in these rooms, it continues to vibrate like for a very, very long time. Like these
excessive resonance,
yeah, and so they think that maybe they had like different people throughout, and they would like hit these like little pitchfork things and create like this music that would resonate from the pyramids. The granite beneath may have connected to some sort of aquifer that was beneath it when the Nile was closer, which again, if that was the case, it was a longer time ago.
Yeah. The ancient people had a really high understanding of acoustics, whether it was the orators in Rome or whether it's the people who were, chopping heads in the Aztec and Incan Empire, because they were to stand on top of it and speak. Everyone down below could hear it because of how everything was built, and everything that was said on the bottom would be spoken into the top and would reverberate out perfectly. The ancient understanding of acoustics is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing.
And they may have understood more. You got the Baghdad batteries, which again you actually find these all over the world. Baghdad was just the first place where it was in enough shape for them to be like, oh, that's what that is. They had like vinegar and salt and copper inside of these vases that would have been electrified. And then you look at the Ark of the Covenant, may have been some sort of electrified thing. And then you look at like all the different things throughout like historical texts that's like this thing was electrified. You're like, oh well, so they might have had more of an understanding of that stuff. So if they were using some sort of ancient technique to get electricity through the aquifers under these the pyramids of Giza, then it would have worked essentially as a giant device, which again like would resonate, like perhaps electrifying this granite somehow. We don't really know. Could have turned again the thing into a giant Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology there that we don't fully understand, but we can see that there was definitely something larger at play going on.
And that was forbidden knowledge. So, spicing things up even more, throwing the last little bit of salt on this whole thing. We've talked about stoned ape theory, ancient astronauts, Silurian hypothesis, and they all have this idea that the knowledge was granted to us at some point. There was we got the fucking frontal lobe on this shit, and perhaps it was leaked to us, again, from extraterrestrials or pre-existing civilizations. It was what led to our agriculture, our metallurgy, the study of, taking bronze and iron and copper and like fucking making shit out of it. And then weapons development, gunpowder and what have you. Forbidden knowledge. Cultivation of plants like fruits and vegetables didn't just happen overnight. We're hunters and gatherers for a while, and then boom, we're farmers. The agricultural revolution coincided suspiciously with an explosion in population and an explosion of other advancements, along with the ancient mythology that we've talked about. The Sumerian Enuma Elish, the biblical Genesis, mentioning the gnosis of the gods. I mean, gnosis is what that is. It was granted to humanity. But, there's always this idea that there was a war behind it. Was this leap in technology a gift or perhaps a trade? The Mahabharata describes weapons so devastating. They've been considered to be WMDs, ancient nuclear disruptions. The knowledge required to create these would certainly qualify as forbidden knowledge. And again, this was thousands and thousands of years ago. Ancient stories like the Heavenly Wars in Mesopotamian mythology, the Garden of Eden and the fall of Lucifer, the Titanomachy, where titans like Coeus and Prometheus were punished for intervening in the wisdom of humanity, and the epics of Gilgamesh, Noah, David. There was this fall and this rediscovery of humanity, but there were also these leftover beefs to resolve between like David and the giants and what have you. So the early fallout of this war could be an allegorical account of humans' interaction with these advanced beings or advanced knowledge, a fall from grace, a punishment from the gods. It's described all over the world. And what was this allegory? Again, even if you were to dismiss these other things we've talked about, then what is it? You know, there was some ancient people or ancient aliens or whatever, and they had their own factions. Some of them were like, don't intervene, and others were like, who cares? They probably have ethics and agenda far beyond our comprehension if they exist. Some people say we're an experiment and the aliens are Big Brother, but others, like myself, would say we're probably some form of entertainment, like that show, Big Brother. So let's tie it all together. What if this knowledge was imparted to us from otherworldly or ancient civilizations, either a blessing or a curse, depending on how you look at it, a powerful tool for progress, but also a Pandora's box? What does it all mean? What do you think about this?
People need to care about history, whether it's recent history or ancient history or speculative history. There's a lot to be learned at every turn. You know, the idea that there was a previous civilization before Sumeria's and is like I said before, is extremely likely to me. If they had, you know, planes, any type of technology that is even remotely like ours today, say that a culture in 80,000 BC had bombers armed with Tsar bombs like Russia had, you know, that would be the exact same thing that, you know, the Hindu faith teaches of in the before times, that all you need is one plane to drop a Tsar bomb enough times across the planet to, you know, once again, reset everything. Yeah. And then the humans that managed to survive that after thousands of years of nuclear fallout and scavenging, all they're going to see is the remnants and tales of what happened before.
War never changes.
And just like a game of operator, you know, you start with one story, you know, you get to, but to the last person, it's changed enough. And that's what we see in modern history now. I mean, even today, people can't agree on whether or not Elvis liked peanut butter and banana sandwiches. And that's actually
Wait, that's an argument? I thought that was canon.
Yeah, exactly. But people can't even agree on the facts from 50 years ago, let alone 100 years ago, let alone 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. You're going to tell me that you can't tell me what Elvis liked to eat, but you're going to tell me exactly what Jesus said? You're going to tell me exactly where the pyramids came from when you can't tell me how AIDS was a thing in the 80s and what the government response was to it?
Yeah.
You know, all you need is 20 years, sometimes as little as 10 years, to completely screw the story up. And so, you go to these larger questions and these larger stories, you have no hope, truly, of understanding what the original story was.
Yeah.
There's too much time has passed.
Yeah.
There's no way to get back to it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, what can you really say? Does it really matter at this point? So all these stories are allegories that, or religion has all these fables that we're supposed to take as anecdotal stories. Mm-hmm. It's about the message.
Yes.
What was the core message you got out of it?
Yeah.
Don't nuclear annihilate yourself to death ever again, because the previous culture did, and now here we are. Yeah. And we consider them gods and aliens from before. And the message was, don't kill yourself in that type of catastrophe. Yeah. And we're headed right in that same direction again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So true, man. Man, y'all be careful. Yeah.
Yeah. Love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Be suspicious of your neighbor, but love your neighbor.
Yeah. Golden rule, turn the other cheek. Sometimes an eye for an eye, but when it's an eye, you know, not words.
Yeah. Yeah. There's Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
But no, you get back
so
to all this
good.
stuff. You mentioned, where did people come up with agriculture? We were hunter-gatherers, and then out of nowhere, we were farmers.
Yeah.
Read Ishmael by Daniel Quinn.
Ooh.
Then read The Story of B by Daniel Quinn. Then read My Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. Those 3 books will sum up everything you really need to know about everything. Wow. I in my early age, I did a lot of reading on various religions and comparative religions. I kind of left the church and then tried to find my own path. And after many years of just nonstop reading, I got to that book series, and that worded everything I was trying to say perfectly.
Awesome.
So I can't recommend that enough. And specifically saying we were hunter-gatherers and then boom, we were agriculturists is the foundation of what's going wrong in the world.
Whoa.
And the book's not saying that's what's wrong. It's just that was the catalyst. That was the moment. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've been a band called the Ziggurat, and it's all about Mesopotamia and all those things, but the Mesopotamians weren't the good guys.
Right.
They weren't the bad guys. They were just the people who killed off the competition en masse.
Yeah.
And then the way they lived became the standard for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's not good. So read those books. I can't recommend them enough. They will change your life.
We're going to have to put up a reading list as we go along this episode, the Dwayne Boyd reading list, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I could
that.
do that for hours.
I love that, man. There has to be a lot there. There has to be a lot there because it is. It's like, because again, I'm hyperbolizing when I say 1 million years, but it's like hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens were what they were, and we found remnants of other things like Denisovans and maybe giants. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I have yet to see a compelling skeleton.
Yeah. But the Denisovans, though, we found the dwarves, we found the hobbits. Those were real, which is mind-boggling. But it's there were all sorts of different kind. Neanderthals, which we thought was a war, but some of them may have been warring, some of them may have been loving. And there was a little bit of mixing going on. Who knows? Again, we don't really know because it's been hundreds of thousands of years, but what's crazy is just like for 80% of that, like hundreds of thousand years, we're hunter-gatherers, we got our heads up our asses, maybe telling stories and shit, and then over like, I wonder what how he puts it in that book, but my understanding was like it's like 2,000 years, like it's which in that scale of time is pretty quick, but it's like
in the grand scheme of things, it's fairly fast,
and all over the world too, like kind of. Like,
but
I can't.
The agricultural revolution in Mesopotamia changed the face of the world forever. Suddenly, you were able to be God. Because you were no longer living day by day, hunting and gathering for what was available. You were now in control of what was available. Yeah. And, small scale, and small scale might be fine, but even with like the Incas that we talked about with their slash and burn, that, once they realized that their way of life was unsustainable, they abandoned it.
Like, where are all those trees going?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they hunted and gathered for forever, and then you have this culture that rose, and we have clear evidence of how they used agriculture in their life, and then they disappeared. So you have the Sumerians who doubled down, and then you have the South Americans who said this isn't working, peace out.
Yep.
And then of course Sumerian culture found, after a couple thousand years, found the remnants of the South Americans, and we killed them all.
Which is just, and that's always what I think is the most interesting part of the occult, and I think a lot of people that's what's most interesting about the occult is that like what's often attributed to the occult are like the remnants of the motherfuckers that are like wiped out, and always like wait, no, they had some good stuff to say, no, they had some good ideas, and then you go back and you're like, we burned their library or whatever.
Well, and that's truly a litany of the human existence, and I mean, as much as I hate to say it, that started in Mesopotamia.
Yeah. I mean, Canaanites, Hittites, Babylonians, all that stuff. It was such a mess. And the other magic was the magic of language too back then, you know, which that's a whole other thing I can't believe I didn't even touch on. But like when you mention like people became gods, you know, they find the remnants of a lot of these deities were originally based on like god kings or people that they thought were blessed in one way or another, and a lot of those people just had a silver tongue.
Yeah, can you imagine living in the jungle or in the desert or in the plains and living your life eking it out day by day, or finding it to be fine day by day, and then suddenly you see someone whose land is nothing but endless orchards and endless crops and all the food you could ever want and endless clean streams of water and palaces of stone everywhere. Suddenly that person looks like a god to you who's able to control the world.
His house is a triangle, and he was trying to tell me why that's so much better. I couldn't really make sense of it. It's fucking magic, man.
But he had food.
yeah, he had food.
Had all the food.
yeah, like you could not knock his fucking wall down.
Yeah, he said if I helped him work, I could have some food.
Exactly, and then then
you're locked in.
Yeah, man, and then you got the Garden of Eden, and
some goober in Mesopotamia figured out how to grow food, and now we have to have a credit score.
I couldn't have said it better myself, man. And that wraps up today's epic on the Snide Show's info scat. From alien theories to historical oddities, controversial wisdom, we've covered it all, or at least a little bit of it all. You know, got a good reading list there, so definitely dig deeper into this stuff. Remember, the universe is a big, mysterious place, and we're just starting to scratch the surface, perhaps for the second, third time. Until next time, keep those brains hungry, keep those eyes open, check out the Ziggurat everywhere, and most importantly, stay snide.
Well done, sir.